see a lot of people here I know and a lot of I don't know. It's the first time I'm doing this talk, so if you feel that the feedback you want to give isn't suitable for the public review forum, please come and chat to me afterwards. Use the app. Yeah, let's go.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thanks, Jacques. Jacques is here to talk to us a little bit about interesting new insights he got. I don't know where from, but that's going to be...
That's my job.
It's his job to tell us what that is. Jacques, so good luck and thanks for sharing your talk with us, pioneers and town planners. And obviously, we'd really like to know what you mean by software best practice these days. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for the clap. Yeah, my name is Jacques De Vos. I'm a developer coach and founder at InReality, and we help all kinds of software-enabled businesses, from startups to big enterprises, on building their products and doing it in a good way. So we're always trying to find the best practices. It's a lifelong journey for us, how to get good at software product development. And so this talk is really close to heart. We learn every month, we learn every day, learn every year. And there's a few patterns we started seeing. Call it anti-patterns, a few things that don't work. And this picture of this airstrip kind of makes me think about one of those. This is in Nepal. Friends of mine took a hike to the Everest base camp earlier this year, and they showed me this airstrip, one of the most dangerous in the world. And it's the only way you can get close to Mount Everest. And it made me think that if you are building a new startup product and you try and take off from this airstrip in a Boeing, what will happen? You'll see some fireworks in those beautiful mountains. You'll probably crash, and then because you've got a very limited runway with which you have to work with before you take off. But then the flip side of this is, what do we if we have a mature enterprise product, millions of people relying on it every day? They just want it to work, and they just wanted to do the job they wanted to do. If you take that same kind of approach as you do with a startup, and taking shortcuts, cowboy coding, if you will, at best you'll end up introducing technical debt and just slowing down over time and just kind of never going anywhere and having to start again, or just basically get stuck, or at worst just crash and annoy all your users and maybe even endanger them. So those two kind of extremes of different contexts became very clear to me. And with this comes this idea of maybe we require different ways of doing things in these different contexts. Maybe the amount of automated tests, the amount of planning you need to do up front versus just exploring as you go, the amount of scalability and all those kind of things, maybe not the same always. So you might have had these ideas yourself, or might have have your own ideas on different practices, but our industry is still very immature. Most debates still seem to be grounded on the idea that there is a best. So I don't know if you've ever seen Twitter debates on no estimates. It's like, you need estimates. No, you don't. Okay, no estimates doesn't mean you don't need no estimates. It's kind of, it's kind of a reaction to, hey, maybe there are different contexts. So luckily, I think our industry is starting to adopt this idea, first class. So the last year or two, a few prominent thinkers also wrote and spoke about this idea in various forms. And during this talk, I want to just introduce you to a couple of those, and then just color that in with a few of our own stories. And then I'll just introduce you to my own synthesis of everything I've learned. And let me give you the too long, don't read version of this. There's three specific areas that you really need to look at to know what the right practices are for your environment. The first aspect is your customer needs. I think Ken Beck mentioned it, you hear it more and more at each conference, but you really need to know the why. You really need to know who you're building it for and the need you're serving. Otherwise, you might do it in the wrong way. The next big factor is the maturity of your product. Like I said, that airstrip, startup and an enterprise project, they're at different stages of maturity. So maybe there are some different ways to approach them, and maybe that's fine. And then the last one is more specific to your product or the project you're busy with. What are the risks? What is going to derail what you're busy with? Doesn't matter what maturity you're at or what your customer needs are. So for me, in my mind, it came to these three ultimate areas, but you can make up your own mind. The first area is the maturity of your product. And it's useful to think in terms of the evolution of a product or technology in order to understand this. So Simon Wardley, who I'll be speaking more about lately, he says, there's typically these 4 phases in a life cycle of a technology, or let's call it a product. It starts off with ideas. It starts off with some genesis, and then typically goes into a custom build phase. After that, it becomes a product you can buy, and then later on it just becomes a commodity or a utility like electricity or water. So a good example of this is programmable computers. The first programmable computer was, and the first program was thought up in 1850, I think, 1840 by Ada Lovelace and Charles Babbage, where they envisaged this programmable machine, the Babbage engine. Only about 90 years, less than 100 years later, they built the first computer. There's a debate who built the first custom computer, but a German in the Second World War built a machine called the Z3, which was essentially a programmable computer. That was the 40s. And then it started becoming a product. You didn't have to buy a unique custom-built one. So the IBMs of the world started getting this, you literally buy your mainframe in a box. It's just a big box. The boxes became smaller, but you purchase the product. And then where we are now, computing has started, becoming a commodity. You're just paying for processing and memory, and if you think about the cloud and AWS, you literally just pay for what you use. So, and it's always available. So this kind of idea of evolution over time isn't a new one. You might have seen this sigmoid curve before. In 1962, this idea was researched by someone called E.M. Rogers, and the diffusion of innovation. Who's seen this before? Just for interest's sake. Okay, so about a third of you. So this speaks to the adoption of a technology over time. So for a long time, there's a flat line. There's early adopters. We can take anything. We can take Agile way of working as an example. For a long time, there were Kent Beck and his few buddies. somewhere in a basement. Um, and then over time, suddenly, somewhere, it was like, this actually works. Even Kent Beck called it extreme programming, right? Because I don't know why, but it seemed extreme, that way of working. And at some time, it was like, well, this works in a lot of situations, and something happened, and that adoption started shooting up. And then I would say, I don't know, with Agile we might be somewhere, it's hard to say, we're somewhere there. It's already became kind of mainstream. And then it kind of just becomes the new normal. People, the new thing would, the next big thing would probably go through a similar curve. So that's the vision of innovation. And it typically follows that pattern. And you can apply the same idea to think in economic terms about your product. So if you think of your revenue, initially a startup doesn't make money. That's why a lot of them need funding. The ideas aren't validated. And then as it starts getting adopted, that revenue, it starts growing in all kinds of directions. And then at some stage it normalizes. It becomes an incremental improvement. So this is I think what Ken Beck built on, and his work at Facebook showed him that in these three, he chopped it up into 3 phases, and his work there showed him clearly that how different the approach is in each. So the first phase is explore, and your aim when you're exploring is you just want to move quickly. You just want to do experiments. It's almost, if I take the explore phase to the extreme, it's like playing a lotto. We want to play it lots of times because we just want to find that next big thing. We don't know what it is yet. We don't know what the market will take on, but we're just exploring, almost betting lots. So there we really don't want to spend a lot of time. We want almost quick and dirty experiments, if you will. And then we hit expand. Oh, people want this. They're starting to adopt this. Expand is interesting. It's probably the least understood phase. Things are just growing. You just have to react to the demand, whether it's scale on your system or ways of people want to use your system. And this thing needs to be, start handling a lot of users. So you need to put on your proper software development and software engineering cap, and quality and those things will start becoming a lot more important. And then the last one is extract. We've got a product, it's making money, we can't risk it. People are relying on it. We can't take big bets. It's all about calculated incremental improvements. If I take this to the extreme, think about a bank account. You put your money in and you get some interest. Hopefully you beat inflation, and you're just trying to keep it on that line. So literally this influences everything you do in a software team. To expand on the explore, remember that runway picture. Our very goal is to give ourselves runway. We don't want to be spending months and months on the wrong thing. A client recently approached us to try and help them. They built this very innovative home chef, Uber for home chef idea. Very interesting, very great, but they went out and outsourced building iOS, Android, and web platforms. Thousands and thousands of lines of code, and we helped them to get this thing into the market. And then people were like, yeah, cool, but what about this? But what about this? Oh, and maybe it's not all kinds of projects. Maybe it's these kinds of foods, not all foods. So we started learning things, but guess what? We were out of runway. We spent all our budget. So just when we started learning, our time was up. Nobody had energy anymore. Also, the competitors were able to learn the lessons a lot faster. So let's explore. And I think the book that influenced my thinking on Explore the most is The Lean Startup. Who's read The Lean Startup before? Okay, a lot of you. So it's a modern classic, but I really think it helps us think about exploring and from a process perspective and how to think about it as a business. And then we come into this expand phase. I like to think of it as hack to product. And a recent example is we built this Uber for security solution, very much in explore mode. So we just threw everything together, rented and purchased instead of building where we could, got this basic thing working, and started showing it to potential partners and suppliers, where our competitors went and built this whole thing. We explored, and then we learned, okay, well, we need to focus on meeting this kind of users' needs. And we knew what we had to do, and then suddenly, now everyone wants it. And the salespeople started promising, massive scale operation, and we're like, but it doesn't even work on 2 apps. So we put on our expand hats. Simon Woody calls it the settlers, where they explore we're the pioneers. We put our settlers hat, and we dig in and we start hardening the system, putting tests around, fixing all the real-time issues we found, and we're still in this phase. So, and we're almost at the point where it can handle the growth we're projecting. So then finally we hit this point of extract. Extract phase gets a lot of slack in this industry because it's not cool and it's not agile. But actually this pays most of our salaries in this room. This is mature products that businesses and jobs are built on. And this phase is where most users depend on the systems. So here it's a bit more conservative approach. It's not necessarily, it's still creative, and it's still a lot of the lessons from Agile teams can be applied, but there's a different mindset here. One story, a recent story of ours is a coaching client of ours that hosts most of the email boxes in South Africa, that's still hosted in South Africa. A couple of million email boxes. And the team, they're very creative people, very, the word cowboy does apply. So this team, we showed them, we did a few exercises on TDD and a few unit testing skills, and had a lot of fun with it. It didn't really apply to their jobs. They didn't really see the need in real life. And they were moving fast and innovating. And then they deployed this one feature, and there was some kind of a typecast issue. And I can't give you too much detail of what happened, but people are not happy when their mailboxes get corrupted. They could recover from that, but most importantly, they could learn from that. And the lesson they learned was these weird little exercises we did and the type of testing we practiced, it's actually the answer. And they came up with a policy of no compromises. Everything they started designing a nice test suite, implementing integration tests, unit tests, and everything they did was properly tested. There was zero room, zero tolerance. That's what they called it. So this team of creative people realized that they're actually in extract mode. They can't mess around with people's mailboxes. And they built the best test suite that I've seen recently. So some people say, some teams are better pioneers and explorers, where others are better extractors and town planners, Simon Wadley calls it. I believe there's some truth to that, but I also believe that we can wear these hats. We can know that we can adjust our way of work based on our context. So this just showed us, where our product is. Its maturity should affect how we work. We don't need just one silver bullet. Okay, so that's one dimension. The next dimension, maybe I should have started with this, is the needs of our customer, and that should ultimately be a root of how we go about developing a system for them. So the first model I want to give you, who's seen the spine model before? Okay, most of you, wonderful. So I'm not as good as explaining it. Kevin and Donnie and Joanne from South Africa came up with this, inspired by a lot of other models. And this gives us a great framework to start thinking about how we do things in terms of those needs, and also in terms of the values and the principles. So the way this works is maybe best explained with an example. So if we are debating about a tool, do I use this testing tool or that testing tool? Those debates are often a bit useless, because are we aligned on what we're trying to, the practices we're trying to implement? The first step one up, go up the spine, as they call it. And then are those practices, if we agree on the practices, are we in agreement, or if we're in disagreement about the practices, are we in agreement about the principles? And same with values. The principles should be rooted in our values, and our values should be rooted in the needs we're trying to meet. So this is a wonderful conceptual model. Let me just give you a specific example. So should I use Gherkin behavior-driven development test specifications? For those of you who don't know what it is, it doesn't matter. Because it's low on the spine. We first need to ask the question, are we trying to do specification by example? That's a practice. And whether we do specification by example is affected by the principle. Are we trying to do design as a joint effort? The first two talks of the day really spoke about this kind of principle. The Platform 45 guys spoke about getting your client and your whole cross-functional team involved in design. That's a great principle. So if we're all in agreement about that principle, well, we actually have a value. We value collaborative problem solving. And the only reason we should value that is we're actually trying to create systems that meets users' needs in terms of being simple and easy to use. So this is how the spine works. So it's if your spine is, I think the term they use is crooked spine. If these things aren't aligned, you can take it all back to your values and your user needs. So this is a wonderful conceptual tool, and it really helps you with having better conversations about practices and tools, but it's still a bit, it's abstract. So it would still be nice to get a bit more of a practical tool to help us find that way forward. And the next model is what's called value chain mapping. And it's a tool introduced by a guy called Simon Wardley. And a value chain map starts with a chain of customer needs. And here's how you do it. So you at the very top, you start with what is the customer need that you're trying to meet. In this case, example, at a client of mine, we want to pay 10,000 employees. We want to, people need their salaries to live. And there's a lot of rules around how to do that and laws that you can't break. So now we break this down into, so in order to pay employees, you need some kind of payroll service, and because it's quite complex and the rules, you need some kind of support, payroll support. So these things are still quite visible to the user. They'll still know about them. In order to do that, you need, let's just go down the payroll support side. Well, you might need some kind of a ticketing solution so that customers can log support queries, and making sure they get answered. We might need some escalation. So the user might not. So as you go down, it becomes more invisible to the user. You might go as far down as how we do our infrastructure, how we do our DevOps. The user might not know about it, but everything you do you should be able to chain back up to your user's needs. And this in itself is a very useful tool. It's almost like a mind map that shows you wherever you are, whether you're doing infrastructure or it doesn't matter what subsystem you're helping with. It shows you where you are in relation to the user and the value you're actually bringing at the end of the day. So already very, very valuable to do. It gives you a kind of situational awareness. Where am I? How am I serving those needs? Somebody in Kent Beck's talk asked about, hey, but it's like 3 levels down, and there's us, and then there's the customer, and they have the customer, and then there's the user. So this says yes. Okay, cool. So map it out. Map it out. See where you are, but still grounded in the need you're trying to meet. Then Simon Woodley takes the next leap and says, hey, let's plot this. Let's put a axis down. That looks familiar, right? That's our product evolution axis. So let's plot this chain of user needs against the maturity of our product. And now this starts giving us something very interesting. We start seeing whether it starts indicating where we are in our product roadmap, and it gives us a bit of a situational awareness to base our strategy on. Where should we be going? Where should we be adding value? It's a very useful tool. So at this customer with this enterprise payroll solution, we realized that they built payroll support, which wasn't meeting the needs anymore, and they custom developed this. And once we mapped it, we realized that, well, support system, ticketing systems, things like Jira, it's actually not a new idea anymore. It's not even a custom product level idea anymore. It's actually become a commodity. There's nothing interesting about Jira-like systems anymore. Sorry, Jira fans. But it's become a commodity. So we probably shouldn't have built a custom system around this. We should have focused all our custom development work on the interesting things, the domain-specific payrolls, making payroll easier, and those kinds of things. So we took that idea and we realized, okay, well, and we did a bit of research and we found good open source ticketing solutions. And we implemented that and we realized for a few of our special rules, we can just build small plugins. So we adjusted our strategy. I think often creative development teams love innovating. They love new ideas. But there's only so many, we only need so many ticketing solutions, and we need only so many CRUD applications. We love being in research mode, but sometimes we shouldn't be. Sometimes the user doesn't benefit from that. So that's the key idea here is start with the why. Start with the user's needs, and then start mapping or just start realizing where we are and where is the value that we want to bring, and start focusing the way we work based on that. So that's the second big factor, customer needs. So the third one, it's kind of a grouping of it's almost like other, because in software projects, a lot of things can go wrong. I'm sure there's no one in this room who hasn't seen at least 10 different things go wrong in a software project. So that's why execution risk is the next factor. There's actually an old model called the spiral model. Who remembers the spiral model? A few hands. Barry Boehm, I think I think about 30 years ago. But his idea is there's this spiral of processes, and at each iteration, you actually review the risks. You try and assess the risks, and you adjust the way you work based on those risks. I think it's a very good idea. I think it's a brilliant idea. And those risks can typically fall into these two categories for me. The first one, probably the biggest one, is, are we building the right thing? It's not always something you can solve with analysis. And then the second one is, are we building it right? Are we building it to the right level of quality? So on the first point, are we building the right thing? There's been a lot of talk about how to solve this problem better. And Jeff Patton's dual track development is a very good example of this. I wouldn't say the only one. This idea keeps popping up everywhere. The specific idea is to say, hey, maybe we have let's call it a team that runs Scrum or runs in iterations or sprints. But then maybe we have a part of that team that runs ahead, not a separate team, but that's only job is to go and test ideas, to go and experiment, and it's almost a little explore. He calls it the discovery, the discovery lane. So the important thing there is, can you see these little bins? You throw away the things that don't work. You say no before it gets into the main development loop where you might be applying a lot of rigorous quality practices. So dual track development, check it out. It's got a few good insights. But building the right thing, I think, certainly is the biggest problem. And then the second one is, are we building it right? Are we building it to the right level of quality? And in order to know what that is, I find it useful to go back to the ISO naming of these quality of service attributes. It's quite a detailed breakdown. And instead of just prioritizing your backlog and your list of features, go and prioritize your quality of service items. See what's really important to your business and your user. When we've done this exercise, in a lot of cases we found that usability might be more important, or reliability. for example, at Vodacom, people just want it to work. They don't necessarily care about all the bells and whistles. And same with usability. So go and rank this. Every product is different on this scale. And what you normally find is that software teams and software products are run like feature factories. Feature. But you might be really missing the point of it. You might be missing the very qualities the users want from your system. So it's important to remember, especially from a product owner perspective, that we're not feature factories. And value isn't features. Value is a quality of service. It's a service that's at the quality you want. So, and then there's the obvious risk culprits like budget. If we burn through our budget, we're done, and not in a good way done. Then cost of delay you might have heard about. Sometimes speed is the most critical factor, and taking longer is risky. And then real deadlines like a looming election. You can't just delay that. So these things might also affect how we do things. So in summary, execution risks is always a part of this mix of how you approach a project or development on a product. So that almost brings us to the end, and I just wanted to mention that it's a bit of a dangerous talk because I'm giving a ticket to say, just go and choose your practices. There's still lessons learned in the industry. There's still things that work and things that don't work in specific contexts. And to this point, it's just important to mention that, things like working software needs to run, and software will change. Those things, whether you're on an enterprise or a startup project, I think they still apply. Feedback, the need for feedback. I don't know of any type of software system that doesn't need feedback to help you through the risks. It might be different kinds of feedback. On the one side, it might be feedback to help you build the right thing, meet the market, or solve the problem. And on the other side, it might be feedback to, are we going to break everything? Different kinds of feedback, but you still need feedback. You need good communication. And it's always a design activity. It's not a manufacturing activity as we believed earlier on. So these kinds of things, and I think the points Ken Beck spoke about this morning also falls into this category. So he spoke about kindness. You need kindness and you need respect in your team to be able to build good software. Who can help me? You need honesty. That's part of that feedback and feedback. It's part of that idea. And the shorter cycles also speaks to it needs to run and give you feedback. So these kinds of things, I believe I haven't never seen cases where you don't need these things. So just because we're saying it's context specific doesn't mean throw out the baby with the bathwater. It's learn from the past. Learn that certain practices are best in a context. I find it useful to think in terms of these design patterns and the patterns Ken Beck spoke about this morning. Those patterns speak to context. If you go read up about architecture patterns or software patterns, it starts with a very particular context, and then something that has worked before in that context. So don't throw away the baby with the bathwater, even though best practice is context specific. So just to bring everything together, in my mind, all of this context that we need to decide on how to approach software development, we can put in three groups. I'd say the first and most important is the customer needs, the problem, the why, the problem we're trying to solve. Then the second one is the maturity of our product and our business goals. Our what is our business model? And then finally, just the execution risks on the actual project. So I invite you to just go and read up about these things. Some of it is new. There's videos and blogs. There's no books about any of these yet, as far as I know. Go and read up about and start mapping out your own context. Start growing a bit more of a situational awareness of the environment you're in currently and the needs of your users, maturity of your product. Thank you. Thanks. Any questions? That makes sense.
What's your biggest challenge with software development? Personally yours?
Well, communication is always the biggest challenge. It seems to be a kind of a universal, but it's such a wide thing. But I would say building the right thing is almost normally seems to be an even bigger problem than building the thing right. Because if you're just building the minimal, simple right thing, then you end up with a simple system, and a simple system is a lot better to keep at a high quality. But I would say communication. So good communication is always a best practice, I would say. Yes, Aslam. Why did I call it risks? Well, like it's you can go over it. It's not a hard constraint, and not all of it might be as hard. If you go over budget, you might not be out of the game. You can go on, but there might be adverse effect. But I like the word constraint more. I think constraint, there's no specific reason. I think it's very useful to think into. Sorry? Design constraints. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I guess this whole factor, you can call this whole section constraints / risks in a way. I think it works just as well. I might actually change it. Yeah. But these three are just my kind of way of simplifying all the factors. You might cut it up in different ways. Any other questions? So we just briefly touched on a lot of this stuff. Yes, sorry, Justin.
So there's a lot of aversion against trying to create, simple exploration products that do the bare minimum. It's still, any product you put out is going to have a certain amount of scale and load immediately just because of the member base that exists for that organization. So how do you approach that? Are you sort of immediately into that sort of expand mode, or?
That's a good question. Just want to grab this. So I think, you know, maybe when you're still in the idea phase, I think a lot of organizations and teams just have closed groups, so that they'll simulate having early adopters. You know, it might be your colleagues, or so using alpha releases and kind of canary release rollouts and those kind of things, because some of the things you do in this organization is still on that very innovative side. So I would say that technique of rolling it out, moving it to the right as it gets ready, I would do that and try and limit the impact. If it's completely integrated with the existing solution, makes it trickier. But I believe a lot of the ideas around continuous delivery help us with that. It's saying, you know, always build it to quality, always build it releasable, always build it at a high quality, but maybe not switch it off using feature toggles or branch by abstraction. But I would try and I would invest in practices and you know, a lot of the DevOps practices and those things might help you there. I would invest in enabling that for your organization. I don't think it comes for free. To be able to move fast and safe at the same time, it doesn't come for free. It is what a lot of us are aiming for. And if you think about an organization like Amazon, I think they've achieved a lot of that. But go and look at what they invested into that. The whole AWS, the whole cloud, which is revolutionizing IT, was their investment into enabling their teams to self-service their own infrastructure so that they can move on their own cadence. So that's a multi-billion-dollar investment to help them do that. So it doesn't come for free. There's no silver bullet to move safe and fast at the same time. But it is a very good question. I would say whatever you do it. Try and understand what you're doing. Do it explicitly. Form that situational awareness. I think that's the heart of the talk is start forming that situational awareness. Know when you're hacking and know when you're hardening. Yeah. Anyone else? Maybe that led to some ideas.
No more last questions? Thanks, Jacques.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.